November 14th, meeting of the Bluff Village Board of Trustees. Clerk, please call the roll. Thank you.
Trustee Ankerman?
Here.
Trustee Fisher?
Here.
Trustee Hatch?
Here.
Trustee Marquis?
Here.
Trustee Ryder?
Here.
Thank you. Also, a notice was received by a member of the board in accordance with village policy, and Trustee Rappin will be deemed authorized to attend the meeting electronically unless a motion objecting to the member's electronic attendance is made, seconded, and approved by 2/3 of a member of a public body physically present at the meeting. If no such motion is made, then Steve's request to attend the meeting electronically shall be deemed approved. Do I have a motion? Thank you.Moving on. Next is our Pledge of Allegiance. Please stand and join me in reciting the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Next is item number 3, the consideration of the minutes of the October 24th, 2022 Village Board meeting. Is there a motion to approve the minutes?
So moved.
Second.
Second.
Thank you. Clerk, please call the roll.
Trustee Ankerman?
Aye.
Trustee Fisher?
Aye.
Trustee Hatch?
Aye.
Trustee Marquis?
Aye.
Trustee Rappin?
Aye.
And Trustee Ryder?
Aye.
Thank you. Next on our agenda is the non-agenda items and visitors. The Village President and Board of Trustees allocate 15 minutes during this item for those individuals who would like the opportunity to address the Village Board of Trustees on any matter not listed on this agenda. Each person addressing the Village Board of Trustees is asked to limit their comments to a maximum of 5 minutes. I do not believe we have here anybody who would like to address the board. Do we have anybody online?
There are 2 participants in the virtual meeting, but none of them are raising their hand to make comments at this time. But if they'd like to, please do so. Okay.
And we're moving on. Next is item number 5. The Village President and Board of Trustees will entertain requests from anyone present on the order of business to be conducted during the Village Board meeting. I don't believe.
You have 7B.
7B. 7B. Any more items? And so we shall move to 7B. That would be the village administrator's report for the request from the North Shore Water Reclamation District to waive permit fees.
Without objection.
Are there any objections? And so,
Yeah, in the packet, there was a request, a letter from the North Shore Water Reclamation District discussing their pending application for a building permit. They have not submitted application materials for the entire project, but for the most, I will call it the civil engineering aspects of the project. And the village continues to work with the district as well as the Lake Bluff Park District on finalizing the memorandum of understanding that will be the kind of the final piece to all of this. But this request is in front of you this evening, and given the way the village's policy is written with respect to waiver of fees by other governmental entities or service providers, the district doesn't necessarily directly meet the standards because of their taxing body is much larger than the village and goes beyond that. So their revenues are derived well beyond the village limits, but nonetheless is before you requesting the waiver.
Mm-hmm. So other entities that do not have the exact same footprint have come before the village before asking for waivers. So notable examples would be CLC Jawa.
The Park District, the school district.
The Park District, yeah, the school district even includes areas that are outside the village of Lake Bluff with Knollwood, that type of thing. And historically, these types of waivers have been granted. So we're also very appreciative of the work that is outlined to be accomplished on the beach, one of our greatest assets, and we're excited to see that work start and complete as soon as possible. So I don't have an objection to providing that waiver if there's any other input from other members.
Joy? Terry? Susan?
I just have a technical observation, but I have no objection.
The only other footnote I would say is that in the past, when the village has approved waivers of this nature, if there's been any other third party that the village has hired, an engineering firm or some other entity to review the application requirements, at this point, we are looking at having a civil, I think a structural engineer look at this, given the unique elements of this project at the foot of the
Bluff.
yeah, the bluff, as well as it's getting it to the water's edge. So, but we're not expecting a very large dollar amount, but just that's, again, just want to clarify, that's what historically has been
So
done.
in keeping with that, it
Yeah.
does make sense to provide that caveat that those types of expenses would be covered.
So with this caveat, we are very appreciative of the work being done by NSWRD to the village of Lake Bluff. It's a big deal to us. We are a beach community, so to you, to your action and to what you are intending to invest in our village, I am appreciative, and we are appreciative as a village to what you intend to achieve in our community. So I'm fully favorable to waive that fee. It's a very significant fee, and you are doing a very significant work, so thank you very much.
You just need a motion to waive.
I move that we waive the fee with the caveat that additional specific expenditures by the village be excluded from that waiver.
A second.
Thank you. It's a roll call vote. Clerk?
Trustee Fisher.
Aye.
Trustee Hatch.
Aye.
Trustee Markey.
Aye.
Trustee Rappin.
Aye.
Trustee Ryder.
Aye.
And Trustee Ankerman.
Aye.
Thank you. Trustee Swarthout, thank you very much. Mr. Waters, thank you very much as well. So resuming our normal order of agenda, next item would be item number 6, the village finance report, and specifically item A, the warrants report for October 25th to November 14, 2022, and October 2022 payroll expenditures. Is there a motion to approve this warrant report?
So moved.
Second.
Thank you very much. I'm not ready. So as a summary of background and reason for request, we have expenditures of village fund for payment of invoices in the amount of $583,378.99 for October 25th to November 14, 2022, and we have expenditures of village funds for payment of payroll in the amount of $282,365.24 for October 2022. You will find reports and documents attached, especially the warrants report for October 25 to November 14 with the invoice register report shows checks with a status of open are paid. All checks with a status of open are computer-generated checks for the board's final approval. Checks with a status of paid are checks processed manually. Are there any questions on the board? So this is a roll call, if there are no questions. Clerk, please call the roll.
Trustee Hatch.
Aye.
Trustee Markey.
Aye.
Trustee Rappin.
Aye.
Trustee Ryder.
Aye.
Trustee Ankerman.
Aye.
And Trustee Fisher.
Aye.
Thank you. Next item is item 7, that will be the village administrator's report. Mr. Irvin.
We have with us tonight Dave Burr, who is with Rich and Associates, the consultant the village has hired in the past and most recently this year to update its central business district parking study. He is going to give a presentation to you all regarding their methodology, their findings and recommendations, and kind of review this. I'd like to think the village gets the most of its consultants, but I really think we've gotten the most from you on this, so I really appreciate your work with this. This is a very thorough report, and it's great for the village to have the ability to periodically update this and revisit this program and model, if you will, because it helps the village make decisions, certainly at the Planning Commission, Zoning Board of Appeals level, on additional changes in use in the Central Business District. And so I'll turn it over to you, Dave.
Good evening. As Mr. Irvin mentioned, we have a very brief review of the parking study report.
I'm just going to share my screen in 1 second.
A brief review of a long report.
Pardon?
A brief review of a long
With a
report.
brief review. Hit the highlights. So what this study is it's an update to a study that was done for the village back in 2013. And as part of this update, we started from scratch on a lot of things. We did a re-inventory of the parking supply, public and private, on-street and off-street within our defined study area. We were told that there has been not a change in the total square footage, but a change in uses in a number of things. So we actually inventoried what all those various buildings are, what they are today, and the village provided to us what the square footage is that we use in our parking demand model. One of the critical aspects of the study that was done previously and what we did now is what we call our turnover and occupancy. It's a utilization study. And that process involves our staff driving a defined route through the downtown once per hour, and we started that at 9 in the morning, we finished at 7 o'clock at night. And we wanted to compare those results to what we found in the 2013 study. We use all this data to put this and develop what we call a parking demand model, and it takes the square footage, a calculated what we call parking generation rate, number of spaces needed per, generally it's per 1,000 square feet or per dwelling unit. And we calculate what that need is, and we compare that to what the available supply is. And then it allows us to indicate, do we have surpluses or do we have deficits, and what do we have to do in order to address those needs. Another question that the village asked us when we took on the study was to assess the use of the barrier-free or handicap accessible parking. And so we looked at that in terms of the public supply. You are a unique community in terms of the bicycle parking. In my experience, and I've been doing this a long time, the amount of bicycle use that we saw in this community was higher than some of the stuff I've seen in other studies. And so we wanted to look and see what that impact was. And all this fed into development of some recommendations. Now, the study area that we have, it included 9 blocks, and block 1 is the Metro Overflow Lot, 2 the Metro Lot, 3 Village Commons, and so on, and we tried to provide a legend as to what some of those are. This numbering system follows the same numbering system that we had in 2013, so if we had to compare anything, we'd be able to what was on block 3 versus what was on block 7, and so forth. As I said, we quantified the parking supply. The areas in green are what we designated as publicly available parking. Areas in red are privately controlled, and then the on-street spaces. Most of your on-street spaces follows the best practice that it is time limited to 2 hours. Those spaces, we generally want those to turn over. If someone is going to stay for a longer period of time, we generally want to direct them into an off-street parking lot. If you were to look at that map, you would see it would seem that you didn't have a lot of supply, but just by the numbers, but you actually do exceed best practice in terms of the amount of publicly available parking. We define public parking as parking where someone can park and then they can visit any designation. That's opposed to private parking, which is generally controlled by a private entity. You can park there if you're a customer, if you're one of their staff members, but particularly a customer, when your visit is done, they generally want you to get in your car and move, make that space available for the next customer. So there is a change in some of the areas that were designated as public parking before to follow this definition. Library parking is one. The library, it's a public entity, but their parking lot is intended for staff only. So that, we actually took that, it was public before, it is private under this definition. And there were a few other ones that were changed by that, so the proportions changed a little bit. As this shows the public and private, we break that out into the various types of classifications, whether it was 30-minute, 15, 2-hour permit, what have you. And we had a total of 626 spaces within those 9 defined blocks. 414 of those were public, were about 66%. 2/3 of the supply is publicly available. Best practice in any community is that the community should control or should have a minimum of 50% publicly available. And again, that, as I mentioned before, it facilitates folks being able to park once and visit multiple destinations. If you have too high a proportion that's private, then I go someplace, and when I'm done, I've got to get in my car and I've got to drive half a block to someplace else. So you're actually exceeding that, and I've seen numbers much worse than that in many communities. So you're actually doing quite well. In terms of the barrier-free or handicap accessible spaces, the number of spaces that is required per ADA is a function of the size of the lot. And what we looked at is the lots that are publicly available, that you control. And if you look at the upper portion of the chart on the right, in all but one of those lots, you exceed or you meet the capacity. The only one that doesn't is the Metro Overflow lot. The thing is that doesn't service any, the public portion of that doesn't service any building. And ADA requirements is if you can provide those spaces along a more accessible path or more convenient, then you're meeting the requirement. And you are actually providing 3 spaces on street. On street's not required yet. The ADA board, the architectural board has been talking for years of requiring a number on street. And it's been probably 10 years now and they haven't pulled the trigger on that yet. But you are providing spaces on the street. So with those additional spaces, we think you're meeting the requirement for the number of handicap spaces that you have to provide within the downtown. As I mentioned before, and I don't know if this slide is real clear, but we did the counts from 9 in the morning until 7 at night. We found a peak between noon and 1 p.m. And what this shows is the spaces along Scranton, those block faces are all in red, which means they're more than 90% parking, or 90% occupied. One of the interesting things that we saw in this update was during that lunch and that dinner period, we saw a big spike. The numbers would kind of trying, we get a big spike at lunchtime, the numbers would go back down. At dinner time, we get another big spike. And we saw these numbers where the parking along Scranton was basically full. That is probably why some folks have a perception that there isn't any parking. They come down at lunchtime and I'm not able to park right in front of the restaurant. But if you come either before or after that, those spaces were generally available.
Dave, I have a question for you.
Yes, sir.
So the study, this is on July 14, Bastille Day. So I don't expect any big rush of cars on that one. But have you been able to do that kind of study on a Friday morning on the next day, for example, on a Friday morning around 7 a.m. to 11 a.m.? Because that would be market day, and this is where we receive farmers market. This is when we receive the most complaints, such as Acon Park. Were you guys able to run that study as well?
Can you repeat the question again?
Here, Jeff, we've talked about this. Because the previous study was in the fall, looked at a different time frame. So
So We all know the farmer's market, people are parked all over, but we didn't feel like having them do the counts at that time. We thought that Thursday would be better, because if we're making policy decisions, just that Friday morning peak of the farmer's market, we thought was not appropriate, because we all know every parking spot on street, off street, within 2 blocks of downtown is generally filled up during the market. So they were here during the market to take public comment, but they didn't do this sort of study on Friday. That was directed by the village to do it on Thursday rather than Friday.
Okay.
Just to reiterate, Thursday is a typical day that we normally do our studies. When we do studies in communities, Thursday is a good day. Friday, for a lot of reasons, not so much now because of post-COVID, but you have a lot of, in other communities, the office workers and people, taking Friday afternoons off. And so Thursday was really kind of a standard day for us to do those.
And I do agree with the taking a baseline that is reasonable and moving on with it. My question would have been also, it would have been interesting to see how overbooked, overloaded our parking places are on Friday, to see that, okay, fine, the 99% of the time we're just fine in Lake Bluff, but it happens that 14 times a year we just can't do it. And it would have been interesting to see by how much we are not doing it. And that was really my concern.
Well, isn't the train parking lot never completely full? I mean, is that an accurate
I think
statement?
only one time when the Edens was being resurfaced that I recall that
Right.
it was full.
And I'm kind of just jumping in here, but the thing that I keep getting in my head is when I go someplace new, or even if I go downtown to the city where I don't quite know where everything is, I just know I want to go in general to this area and I hope I can find some parking, I look for the blue P sign, right? And I don't care. I've got a parking spot, I'm happy. I mean, maybe I'll go and look around and find something closer, whatever, but I also know that, whew, there's my something I can count on. And I don't know why we don't do that for the train station, because just like at a grocery store, you think, wow, if it's a parking lot by a grocery store, that's for people who are going to the grocery store, and if I'm not going to the grocery store, I shouldn't be there. The parking lot implies that for the train station, and I don't know why we don't put a blue P and say, free after 10 a.m. That is short and sweet, and everybody's looking for a P. So why don't we do that
That is the recommendation, to make that crystal clear.
with a blue P?
And your agenda item number on the consent agenda does that.
With a blue P.
Well, that signage, the signage will get.
I know, I just don't want to get all wordy McWordenstein and then like, do this, don't do that, just follow this.
No,
No,
the ABR
blue P,
yeah.
free after
Yeah.
10 a.m.,
Yes.
short and sweet.
Yes. In the works.
Okay,
Recommended, and you're authorizing it tonight.
okay.
And Barbara, just to add to that, like at the Business Advisory Committee, when we were talking about it, one of the things we talked about was not only just doing like physical signage, but also on GPS maps, having there be like pings or whatever they call that, where as
Yeah.
you're driving into town, you can be like, oh, I could park here, I could park here. So
Yeah.
we're kind of investigating that as well.
I think it's the off-street, here's the lot, and that one's our biggest asset, and even I, who've lived here a while, always feel like, gee, am I really supposed to be able to do this? I'm not sure. And I never think of doing the lot behind public service by Artesian.
Right.
Never do I think of that. But you get desperate and you see the P and it beckons. And it's like, okay, I'll just do the blue P.
And the other thing that the BAC recommended too was start with the P at the train station, but I think it specifically says not just don't do a big blue P, right? I think that they said the
Don't
opposite.
do the big blue P.
Somebody- yeah.
I want to be clear.
But they said do that and then maybe do the walnut lot next, kind of like do it
Yeah.
incrementally to help do it. But the idea is, I think the ABR over time has commented when we've talked about signage program is like, you can be in downtown Lake Bluff and look, and like you can see pretty much everywhere. And with the,
I'm an old person though.
This-
I want to, and I want to fulfill the letter of the law. Not that I don't, I mean, yeah, I'm human. But if it is obvious, I'm much more likely to do it. I can't tell you how many times I just go, I know I've parked here before, but I'm just not sure, and I really don't want to get a ticket. It's just ridiculous.
yeah.
That I will still have that internal dialogue and debate within myself. So I mean, I just dumb it down, For me, dumb it down.
Big blue P. Check.
I did have one follow-up question about when you were at the farmer's market asking questions. What were you actually asking residents?
Just general comments. We had a couple staff out there, and did they have any concerns, any comments or questions about the parking in the downtown?
Okay,
And-
so it wasn't like we were asking people, do you know you can park on side streets, or do you know you can park in the train station? It was just more of a
It
very
was
general
very
overview.
open-ended.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay.
So it's actually a really good question. I read in your report that you went to talk to businesses, and I think the most I got from businesses ever in the last 2 years, for me anyways, was, okay, some people are parking here, they shouldn't be parking here, and there's not enough parking for my clients. So did you have that kind of conversations with, and how did that go?
Perfect segue. One of the things, and this is common in a lot of communities, is one of the things that we did is, as we did our on-street, we record portions of the license plate. And so we come back again in an hour, is that same car there, or has that car moved? As I said, most of your on-street spaces are 2-hour time limited. So we shouldn't see a car 3 times. That means they're staying. What we found is 6.7% of the vehicles were staying in a 2-hour space for beyond 2 hours. And there's actually one car, I think we saw them 8 or 9 times, which means they were sitting there all day long. Best practice is that violation rate really should be less than 5%. So you're a little bit above that. We'll get into a recommendation to address that in a moment, but you are a little high in terms of that violation rate, and then we can see that. I've seen communities, and this boggles my mind, a business owner will park in front of his business. And it's just like, do you understand the value of that spot if that was turning over 3 or 4 times a day? Your turnover time was almost four times. So that's actually pretty good. But you had a few of those that are taking those prime spots.
And that might be enough for people to roll their eyes and make comments. Thank you. Okay.
There we go. Well, jumped.
One too many.
Jump back one.
Yeah.
So what, as I said, we compared this to the 2013 values, and the column, the chart on the left, the orange is the values from 2013, and is the observations from 9 in the morning until 7 o'clock at night. The blue column are the columns from 2022, and you see, if we look at 2013 versus now, in 2013, we exceeded it every time. But that is looking at the total parking. That is including the parking in the metro lot, which had a lot of commuters. And so what we wanted to do is Metro has said their traffic is down. We looked at what is the amount of parking in there at about 10 o'clock. Those are probably commuters. Anything that comes after that, more than likely, are CBD visitors or staff, which we understand the policy is to park over there. So the chart on the lower right reflects that you're still, in most cases, the 2013 values are exceeding it, but you see those 2 periods, noon and again in the evening, the latest values are exceeding what we saw in 2013. And that reflects, I think, a change in the business use. We're seeing more restaurants coming down, and that impact, and that goes back to what we were seeing, with the on-street parking. So that helps us in terms of developing understanding what's going on here. Now, all that utilization study, the land use information, that leads to our parking demand model. And the columns represent the occupancy that we observed. The line represents what our parking demand model is taking the square footage, the parking generation rates. And you see we get a pretty good correlation between what our model is showing and what we're actually observing during each of those time periods. So we take the parking generation rate at that peak time, noon, and we apply that to the square footage, and we come up with a calculated parking demand, again, for each block.
What's the orange adjustment it said?
The orange reflects a little bit of adjustment, because when we do the counts, they don't necessarily, or our survey, we don't necessarily grab every spot. It's just an efficient route. Sometimes you'll miss spots. When we're calculating demand, we gotta account for those, and so we have to adjust for those spaces that were not directly observed, and that's what those oranges are.
Bless you. So what you're saying here is, bless you. What you're saying here is even at the peak, we're still half of our total occupancy.
Yes,
But
you're
the
only,
total is 629, right, somewhere there.
you're only about 50% occupied at peak time.
Thank you.
And this is taking that parking demand, that parking generation rate, and it calculates the amount, the parking on each block and compares that to, or the parking demand on each block, compares that to supply on each block. And if the yellow means that block is in a deficit condition, meaning the amount of parking calculated for that block exceeds the amount of supply on that block. And if it's in green or blue, it means that's a surplus of capacity. Now, one of the things that we also do is this chart reflects, there's, in the report, you'll see two columns. You'll see a gross and then a net surplus of deficit. Gross takes total demand against total parking supply. So I have private parking, and that's assuming that my excess spaces, someone else can use those. That's not the case. So on the net basis, what we do is we apply the demand first to the private spaces. If there's any surplus on that block, we throw them out of the calculation, because generally I'm not making those available to you over across the street or whatever. So this gives a little bit truer picture of what you're actually seeing. And you see we have minor deficits. I mean, those aren't real huge deficits. And you've got that big surplus over on the Metro lot and on some of those other blocks, you know, the on-street spaces. And you are a very walkable community. So the fact that you have spaces available on adjacent blocks. This would become more critical if you had large swaths of deficits contiguous to each other.
Can I ask a question? So oh geez, I think that's 6, or no, 8 is where the Village Green is.
Yes.
So the 24 excess spaces are the ones that are facing in toward the green, right?
Those would be the on-street spaces surrounding that block.
That are on that green side of the lot. So the plus 24 is right adjacent to the negative 22, and those are across the street from one another, at least as to the, right? I mean,
Yes.
okay. And the plus 28 is on the other side of the minus 22. It just seems like when you look more broadly than just that isolated block and just the other side of the street from that isolated block, those disparate differences even out a bit.
And yet,
And yet,
people will say it's inconvenient to park.
yeah,
Well, and isn't it calculated based on the business-generated need for parking? So the green space has no generated need, so isn't that 24 kind of just adding up all the 24 spaces?
It has zero demand and 24 supply surrounding
It
it.
should have some demand. I mean, people go to the park, but,
a
but you know what I
model,
mean?
right,
It's a
yeah,
model,
yeah,
and I'm just trying to say, what that's saying is that,
right. No demand generated, really, but
right, but you're right, it's an adjacent block, so I'm on the south side of Scranton, I can't go just
All right.
across the street, you know, I have to cross the street.
I think it's so heavily dependent on traffic patterns, right? People come under the viaduct and then they take a left and they look for spots right there. Then they take a right on Scranton, they look for spots right there. And
Then they
if
look for
have
the
to
P.
Right. If they have to circle around and go the opposite direction, right, which isn't convenient or not even that it's not convenient, but it's not easy, then they're like, oh, you know, there's all this maybe parking in different areas, but that's not a convenient traffic pattern for them, so then they assume there's no parking. That's kind of how I read that.
That's a good learning, actually, because following what Barb is saying, if you were along that route of moving around the yellow block, the minus 22 block, number 7, if you were to put along the way P's, signs saying, oh, you should deviate your normal course to that place, then it would resolve our parking issue right there.
I know, that's why we should have the Ps. Broken record.
at least back to Walnut, that street
Yeah,
on Walnut.
yeah.
Right.
So the next step we took is we wanted to project what's going to happen in the future. We had the existing condition, and in any study that we undertake, if there's a known development that we know is going to happen, we will plug those numbers in. Here we didn't have any specific development, but we did have about 15,000 square feet of vacant space, and so here we assume that within the next 3 years, 30% of that would be reoccupied. And what we did is we just took the average of the other uses and applied that to that 15,000 square feet and came up, and you see it increased the deficit a little bit on Block 7 and on Block 3, which is the Village Commons lot, 7 Village Hall lot. And then we looked 5 years out, and we took that same 50%, 15,000, we assumed 50% of that. And it upped the deficit on the Village Commons lot a little bit from, I think it was 21 up to 25. So, again, not huge difference, deficits there. You still have the Metro train station lot, which to me is not an inconvenient lot to walk. I mean, you have, again, you're a very walkable community. It's just getting people to say, you can go there, park, and, you know, it's
Wonder
just,
how we could do that.
well, you know, different things in a smaller community. Just how far people are willing to
Can I
walk.
just ask a quick question? So I know that we always include that lot that is attached to the Montessori school. It's a great lot. There's always parking there. But I'm wondering if, from the standpoint of as we try to encourage people to park in different areas, if that lot actually makes sense as something we include, because you're literally on the other side of the viaduct. If somebody was coming in town that wasn't from Lake Bluff, I don't know that they would necessarily understand it's attached to a neighborhood. I mean, it sounds weird, but it's kind of tucked into a neighborhood next to a school. Your assumption is it's a school lot. So I think it's interesting that we include those numbers in there, because I really don't think it's really part of the downtown. If we're feeling like the big metro lot is a stretch for people, to me, that lot that's on the other side of the train tracks is even more of a stretch. So I don't even actually know where I'm going with this, except for that it just feels like that lot.
That's how it behaves, you're right.
Right,
It
I
behaves
mean-
as a commuter lot primarily, but I will tell you, at certain special events, the
course.
bike, I mean, it is utilized as just another lot.
Right.
And you look at it proximate to both the metro station and the central business district, it is literally a stone's throw, right? You know, it's super close, but you're right in terms of behaviors, and for the longest time, it has been a resident metro parking lot.
Right, yeah.
I live on the other side of town, so when I come into town, I'm not walking, I'm always driving. And when I discovered, I don't even know how, that I could park there, it was like, oh my, I just found out a secret, right? And if only there'd been a way to share that.
Inside information, right?
Well, but it
There was
doesn't have.
something. I
right.
wish there was
I know,
something.
if there was only a way.
I just.
Maybe a letter, I don't
No,
know.
it does have a sign. It's just not blue and it's
I know,
not
but
pink.
that's what I mean about signage. If you have to read every sign, even when I read a sign, you know that there are places that, well, this sign isn't quite up to date, but if you looked at that sign, and it's like too many signs, and I walk away. I want something that makes me feel comfortable. Like, some people will circle and find the best spot, and they circled 3 times and they got that great spot. I don't want to do that. Just give me easy. I'll walk an extra block, you know? But if I don't have that comfort level, I'm going to stop talking now. I do feel passionate about it because I want people to come. And we have it. We've built our field of dreams. They just need to know that they can
Barb,
come.
the study shows that every 2 spots, there is 1 spot free, so you just have to find that spot.
Yeah, but it's, I don't have to hunt for it if I could see that.
Blue sign?
Big blue P.
It's true.
I think we can put a cap on your P sign, but I will say in support of it, because it sounds like it's part of the recommendation, it's gonna
is.
happen. But part of our mission has always been, you know, bringing people in and making it inclusive. And I'm just gonna reiterate and have your back here, because the Metro, I've lived here for a very long time. I have parked in the Metro lot, and I feel like I'm doing something wrong.
Yes.
Even
Even when
even
you
when I
know.
know.
I know.
So there is absolutely something to be said about clear, clean, universal signage. And we're going to dedicate each one of those signs to you, I think.
I mean, there might be a utility also to say on these signs, on these big blue peace signs, when parking is free.
Yeah, free after 10 a.m.
Yep.
End of story.
That would
Nothing
be
else.
useful.
It's so easy.
Excuse me. So essentially what we found is your parking supply is adequate given the conditions that we know right now. As you said, it's probably going back and clarifying some of the signage that is available. The fact that 66% of your parking is publicly available exceeds the best practice, and they should be able to find parking, again, if it's properly signed and indicated where folks can park. Occupancy is down from what we saw in 2013 by anywhere from 23 to 50 spaces, and we did see the values exceeded only during the lunch and dinner periods. One of the things that I did notice, however, is most on-street parking, folks are adhering to the limit, and you don't have full-time parking enforcement. It's done by police officers, and I'm sure it's not an everyday type of deal. They have other duties to do.
It is.
So, well,
Generally speaking.
but so most people, are following the rules. You get a few abusers up there, and that you do meet the requirement for the number of handicap accessible spaces. Interesting thing about the handicap, you're providing 13 spaces in your public lots. There are all spaces in private lots as well, but in the public lots, at maximum on our survey day, we saw 4 spaces occupied, and 3 of those were at the train station. So there was only one other space within the downtown that was using a barrier-free space. There was my staff who was here doing the counts in July. We're seeing, as I said, a lot of bikes beyond my experience.
We're coming
but
for you,
it's-
Copenhagen.
Pardon?
I said, we're coming for you, Copenhagen,
Yeah.
Mark.
But you see, bikes are parked in a lot of places other than bike racks. We did count the bikes in the bike racks. Those are the old fence-style units, and I did have a colleague that worked for me was real big on bicycles, and I think she would have had a canary to see just those style bike racks. I mean, she was always very passionate about the bike racks that, they felt they should have. And again, this just might be folks feel more comfortable, where they can have the bike and see it, as opposed to locking it in a bike rack. Some recommendations. One of the things that, when I was looking at the analysis, it looked like many of the on-street spaces were kind of tight. I was walking around Scranton Avenue this afternoon, and those spaces actually look fine. Although your code says a parallel space can be 20 feet. That is too short. I did a study in a community a number of years ago, and they had shortened their on-street spaces to 20 feet, and there was a lot of complaints because it was just too difficult to maneuver in and out of. Along Scranton, they look to be, the recommended is 22 to 23 feet in order to be able to maneuver in and out of the spot. But as I said, your code says only 20 feet. Enforcement, during periods of significant traffic, or if we were to get more restaurant use, we may want to consider the use of part-time enforcement. Again, we don't want to get, enforcement's purpose is not to get every violator. What it is, it's to get those people who are staying for 7, 8, 10 hours in a spot. Those are the folks that we want to discourage them and have them park in a proper off-street lot. With that, you have, I've seen fine schedules in communities. I'm working on another study. Their fine for parking is $5. And again, it's very random enforcement. If I get a fine and it's $5 and it's once or twice a month, hey, that's the price of doing parking. Your fine is significant enough that if you catch someone, that should be a discouragement. You have a policy that if they park for 2 hours, they can come by again and they're still there, they can get another citation. That's a great policy. We encourage that. Again, the idea is to get folks to follow the rules so that the parking works for everyone. And a business owner, when they've got someone parking in front of their business, that's hurting them if it's an employee or someone who's abusing the system. The one of the things that our parking generation rates, what we looked at was what your code is. And you have very limited uses. It's retail, it's residential, service, and I think office or medical office. And for most uses, it works out to about 2 spaces per 1,000 is all that's required. For restaurant, we're recommending that you consider a use specifically for restaurants. Restaurants are a very much more intensive use. We did put in the report what some of the surrounding communities are using. Our model is based on the ULI's shared use manual, and they have a much higher ratio for restaurant use. Just something to consider to have that requirement, because as I said, it's much more than 2 per 1,000 a restaurant will generate. Goes back to the question we talked about before of the signage over at the train station. It's inconsistent with what your policy is, and to make that clear to folks, with signage there and on the webpage, you can park there, so that folks know that that's not just for train station or metro employees that they can park. Again, just consistency. One of the other things that we also like to see in a community is parking. A lot of folks, they think, once you build the parking, there's no cost to maintaining that. And that's actually not the case. A surface lot is going to have to be rebuilt after a period of time. They generally last anywhere from 15 to 20 years, and that asphalt is going to start having holes in it, tripping hazards and that, and you're going to have to rebuild that lot. And so we recommend the money. I know in the metro lot, that revenue goes to set aside in order to maintain that lot, but you should be thinking about any other parking lots that you have, setting money aside so that when the maintenance does have to be done, the money is there, and it's not trying to scrounge it up in a budget. One of the things that was asked of us is there was a talk of a streetscape between the Village Commons and the park that could eliminate some of those on-street spaces, and we were asked to take a look at that. The fact that you have the metro parking right there, and yes, it's gonna cost you some on-street spaces, but that would be kind of a central community focal point. And the fact that you would have that metro lot available, we really don't have a problem with losing those few spaces. I mean, you have the other parking there, and it could be a very pleasant walk.
So just for clarity, that's the Block 1 concept plan.
So what you're saying is we can actually do a one-way street at that point. If we lose a few parking spaces, we're still fine.
You're still fine.
That's what we're saying.
Still fine. The barrier-free spaces, you're meeting the requirements. You don't have to do anything there. Bicycle parking, as I said, we recommend that you evaluate, whether the parking racks that you have, and my staff was telling me, they'd see a rack one day in one spot, and then they'd come by the next day, and it's moved into someplace else. Normally what we find is those are permanently installed. So perhaps evaluate where there might be some.
In the village's defense, we've been trying to experiment where we place bike racks because of the new streetscape. Before we drill into the concrete, you want to find a location that fit needs and that people would utilize. And there's a bit of a struggle between the Architectural Board of Review that wants bicycle parking that is, I'll call it traditional, where you just put your wheel into it. They're not the most secure. There's other more secure type designs, which the SEC has been pushing for. So there's been that struggle. So the village there's money in the budget to invest in parking infrastructure for bicycles. We've just been trying to experiment where and what type.
Okay.
And there's also no matter what you have out there, the people with the $10,000 carbon bicycles are
Right.
going to, keep them on their hip, and that's it.
Yeah,
They're not going to use this
Very, very well
bike
made.
parking device.
So we're the only community changing our bike parkings every day, right?
I've encouraged the property owners, if they I said, move them around, see what works, so.
And the last recommendation we had was at the east end of town where the PNC Bank is, and there's another small lot just to the east of that vacant property. We understand that is supposed to be for residential use, but until such time that something moves on that, if there is some way that the village could, and I know Mr. Irvin has said they've tried to work with those folks, if they could get that to, it would provide some additional off-street parking at that end of the village. As I said, right now, most of your off-street parking is at the train station lot. There's a small lot at Oak and North Avenue, but most of it is in those two lots. So with that, if there's any other questions?
If I hear no questions, this is incredibly insightful. That has been I've been wondering about that perspective that you just provided. So I really thank you for that. That was extremely helpful to me because we hear a lot of people talking about there is no parking, and they probably hint on the things you have seen yourself, that is those repeat offenders that are probably providing that perspective that, no, there are many people doing that, even though that might be those few repeat offenders. So thank you very much for this perspective, and I really appreciate that.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Steve.
I'm sorry, I do have one question, but it might be more for Jeff. I'm not sure, but, so we did the study in the summer, when clearly a lot of people are riding bikes and, in the winter, does it change in the fall and the winter when the weather gets cooler? People still need to come into town, right? Are there more cars? Are there less cars because it's winter and we're all hibernating? Is it?
So, we actually have in the report, there's two, the study that we did previously was done in November.
Right.
And our thought was, well, why are we seeing lower numbers? And what we're feeling is maybe it's because more walking, more bike parking. So we actually ran the numbers using slightly higher values for November, or for the fall months, and we did bump that parking demand up. In talking with Mr. Irvin, and as we reviewed this, their understanding is some businesses are saying their traffic is down in the non-summer months. So,
I think part of that is due to our heavy on-street dining, on the sidewalks. That all goes in the winter. So like we spoke with the owner of Innovasi, he said their business is down like 30-40% when they have to pull those tables in because they can't physically run that many customers through their inside space. One place where there's a little bit of disconnect in our code is when people talk about, per 1,000 square foot parking demand, we don't account for outside tables. So that is where our code doesn't handle that all that great as far as an approval standpoint, but then we talk about the fall demand. It seems like we're a little different than the national trend that Dave is more familiar with, is that we're so heavily dependent on outside dining that we just can't have that much demand in the fall and the winter.
And I had one other question. Thank you, first of all. Thank you both. So with the Metra train lot, I think maybe one of the deterrents is that gate when you come in. Like when you turn into the lot, there's a gate. So I feel like if after 10 o'clock, you're allowed to park there for free, and sorry, I've never parked there because I just walk generally, but what is that gate? Like, could someone still click and get their parking ticket without having that gate there? I feel like the visual of it is a deterrent for people to come in.
Is there a gate?
There's a
Yes,
gate.
and I couldn't agree more. That's one of the reasons it feels
Weird.
confusing. Yes.
What gate?
I'm trying to think of where a gate is.
No, there's a,
When
like,
you
when
pull
you first
in,
come in, where
is
the
it-
kiosk is.
I
There's
will
the
tell you,
little-
I'm not sure if
There's a machine that you
There's
can
a
take
machine.
it,
There's no gate.
but
There
it
was-
runs you
there
through.
was.
I have run that thing so many times trying to make a train. I will tell you, there is
So the
no
gate's
gate.
gone.
it's
no
it's
gate.
just here's the thing. My brain said there was a gate, and it's the machine on its own that maybe
No, there
creates
used to be a
that.
gate there, though. I remember
There
that.
might
It's like a drive-up window almost with the machine,
It's
but
still,
it's
the machine still implies that you are supposed to be
Paying.
doing a thing or showing that you belong here or paying. And again, it just circles back to it feeling like it's not actually,
Right, so if it's a
Public.
question, I'll just say, oh, forget it.
Right.
I will, because I don't want to break a rule. I don't want to get a ticket, and so then you go circle around,
I
and you're
don't
like,
want to pay. So yeah,
P.
there it is.
I'm glad to know the gate's down. I do recall seeing it. at
Dave,
one-
thank you very much.
thank you.
yeah, thank you.
Maybe I imagined it.
No. No, I think it used to be.
It's a shared imagination.
I know,
I almost said the same thing, so.
I have the same hallucination.
So it must have been there before.
I think it might have
You
been.
probably ran over it.
Yeah.
I probably ran.
So,
I used
thank
to
you so
keep
much,
it
Dave.
Thank you.
We'll probably call you back for the PCZBA to come and give a similar presentation to them since they're so closely involved with changes in uses in the CBD. So, well done. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thanks.
The last item on my report is item C is.
Still on your report.
Yes.
Okay.
This is, the RFP has been put together for the village's update to its comprehensive land use plan, sharing it with you all, laying out goals for that, creating a new framework, rough process outline. It talks about probability of having a liaison, maybe to maybe help usher that project through. But that's kind of the layout here, just if there was any heartburn with this, was looking for that, or if any comments or concerns, but before we put this on the street. If there are none, then we'll cut it loose.
Much needed.
Really impressive. I learned a lot just reading it.
And what you see is that the village, which it makes sense, we're largely a built-out community. The village over time has a land use plan that still has a lot of relevance, but there's been a lot of sub-area plans and specific, land area plans that has been done as a result of the most recent comp plan back in '97. So now we're looking for a new framework to stitch all that together and maybe point the direction for the next, where does EV, where does autonomous vehicles, where does all that take us in the future? So
Very exciting.
that's my report.
Thank you. Moving on from the village administrator's report. Next is our village attorney's report, Mr. Friedman.
No report tonight.
Thank you. Next is the village president's report. I would like to mention we had a Village of Lake Bluff Board of Trustees special meeting this past Saturday that we deemed as a retreat, and it was very, very good. So thank you. I know for sure fact it was a lot of work. It didn't seem like it was perfect. It was so informative. So I'm very appreciative to the work that was done this past Saturday for all of us.
Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you. Glad it worked out. So I appreciate everybody participating in that, so thank you.
Yep. Next is our consent agenda, and that would be the item number 10, the acceptance of a correspondence. Please note all correspondence was delivered to the Village Board of Trustees in the informational reports on October 21st, 28th, and November 4th, 2022. Item number 11, that is a second reading of an ordinance amending Title 3 of the Village of Lake Bluff Municipal Code and the regulations applicable to a Class Z liquor license. Item number 12, a second reading of an ordinance amending the Lake Bluff zoning regulations relating to fence height restrictions for business. Item number 13, a second reading of an ordinance revising license regulations for scavengers and the village's municipal waste regulation. Item 14, an ordinance amending the Lake Bluff Municipal Code and the comprehensive fee schedule regarding the use of village parking lots. Item number 15, a resolution approving a professional service agreement with Lauterbach and Amen. And finally, item 16, a resolution authorizing an intergovernmental, if I can say that, agreement with Lake Bluff School District 65 authorizing emergency access to school facilities and security video feeds. Is there a request to remove any of these items from the consent agenda? Seeing none, is there a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So moved?
Second.
Thank you. Is there any discussion?
There doesn't appear to be any public comment either.
Thank you. Hearing none, and that was talking about parking places, by the way.
Big P.
Hearing none, clerk, please call the roll.
Trustee Markey,
Aye.
Trustee Rappin,
Aye.
Trustee Ryder,
Aye.
Trustee Ankerman,
Aye.
Trustee Fisher,
Aye.
and Trustee Hatch.
Aye.
Motion carries.
Thank you. Moving on to other businesses. Next is item 17, a resolution estimating the amount of the annual aggregate 2022 property tax levy. Is there a motion to approve this resolution?
So moved.
Second.
Second.
Thank you. Annually, the village is statutorily required to estimate the funds to be raised from taxes on real property tax in the village prior to the adoption of a levy. This is an estimate and does not limit the board's ability to levy a different amount, provided it is in compliance with the truth in taxation law and all applicable notice and hearing provisions. The Finance Committee, at their October 24th meeting, reviewed the 2022 levy projections and unanimously recommended approval of an aggregate property tax levy of $4,784,541, so as to capture the revenue necessary to fund the police pension contribution. The village share of the property tax levy of $3,701,177 or $176,198 more than the 2021 property tax extension. The village board's anticipated levy request of $1,084,364 represents a $51,636 increase from the 2021 levy. The total village extension amount, including the library, is $4,702,743, which is $227,834, or 5% greater than the 2021 levy. This estimated levy is in compliance with the amount allowed under the Property Tax Limitation Act. Finally, the first reading of the 2022 tax levy ordinance and the public hearing will be held on Monday, November 28th. Are there any questions to Finance Director O'Connell?
I just want to clarify, because you misspoke, President Charlot. You said the village board's anticipated levy request of $1,084,364 represents, et cetera, but it's actually the library boards. So just for if anyone's listening in, just to clarify.
Thank you. Are there any questions on the board? And thank you for that clarification. I see no questions. And this is a,
Any public comment?
do we have any public comments, and do we have anybody online who would wish to make a comment?
There are two participants in the meeting still. None of them are raising their hands to provide any comment.
Thank you. This is a voice vote or a roll call?
Let's do a roll call.
This is a roll call. Clerk, please call the roll.
Trustee Rappin?
Aye.
Trustee Ryder?
Aye.
Trustee Ankerman?
Aye.
Trustee Fisher?
Aye.
Trustee Hatch?
Aye.
And Trustee Marquis?
Aye.
Thank you. The motion carries. Thank you very much. Next is item 18. A resolution approving a site plan, a resolution approving the purchase of rock salt for the purpose of snow and ice removal from Compass Mineral American, Inc. Is there a motion to approve this resolution?
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. The village fiscal year 2022-2023 budget includes $50,000 for the purchase of rock salt for ice and snow control operations. Annually, the State of Illinois Department of Central Management Services conducts a joint bid for roadway maintenance agencies statewide. This year's approved bid of $78.46 per ton was awarded to Compass Mineral America, Inc. of Overland Park, Kansas, and that would be an increase of 26% over last year. At this price, the village will be able to purchase approximately 400 tons of rock salt totaling $31,384. The village must commit to purchase 100% of the order, and the supplier commits to provide 120% of the ordered amount at the bid price if severe weather conditions arise. Last year, the village salt usage totaled 350 tons due to an average winter. The village currently has approximately 770 tons left over from last season. With the purchase of 400 more tons of salt, the village will be able to adequately cover the winter season. Do we have questions to Drew's team? Any questions online? I see more people logged in.
You've lost one, actually.
Jesus.
Salt discussion and just put them,
No,
that was it.
the parking discussion is over. We're talking about salt and we lost people. Okay, so that would be item 18, and that is a roll call.
Yes, it is. Are you ready, sir?
Please call the roll.
Trustee Ryder.
Aye.
Trustee Inkerman.
Aye.
Trustee Fisher.
Aye.
Trustee Hatch. Trustee Marquis.
Aye.
Trustee Rappin.
Thank you.
Aye.
Thank you. Next is item number 19, a resolution approving a site plan for the re-roof of the public safety building at 45 East Center Avenue. Is there a motion to approve this resolution?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Thank you. Last year, the village engaged a consultant, Structural Technologies, to evaluate the roofs on the public safety building, primarily to determine a solution to water leaks in the sloped shingle roof caused by ice damming, but also to evaluate the overall condition. Following the recommendations in the report, which is attached, the village budgeted for a re-roof of both the flat and sloped roofs on the public safety buildings for next fiscal year 2024. In order to eliminate the ice damming and the leaks, the slope shingle roofs will be redone using a product called Hunter Panels Cool Vent that contains ventilation channels in between foam board and roof sheathing. However you say that. Sorry. These panels will make the roof 4.5-inch thicker. The plans and material samples were reviewed by the Architectural Board of Review on October 4th and November 1st. On November 1st, by a vote of 6-0, the ABR recommended that the village board approve a plan with the condition that the fascia be stepped out as shown in the attached sketch to reduce the visual impact of the thicker roof. After the village board grants this site plan approval, the final construction documents will be completed and advertised for bid. The contracts to perform the work will come to the village board for for approval next spring. Do we have any questions to Drew's team, to Drew and his team?
I was looking at the project description, and I think there's just an oversight by the Structural Technologies Incorporated company in stating that the owner was the Carroll Stream Fire Protection District. So just wanted to note that was in there, and that's just an oversight. And the other thing I wanted to mention, there were some references to copper, and I always think of, you pass by a nice house and you can see the copper, either it's shiny and coppery and noteworthy, or it's, patinaed, and you can kind of see, oh, wow, that's really, really awesome. But I didn't know that there was copper on that roof.
Yeah.
And Drew informed me that indeed there is copper.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Mike, you don't disagree with that, do you, sir?
No, I don't. Well, their copper is mostly the gutters on that roof. That is interesting. Your comment. I suspect our gutters may have some kind of coating that's prevented that from aging and patinaing, but it does make it look a lot like just brown aluminum, which is what we're proposing for the new material. So it really hasn't benefited us to have the expensive copper gutters there for the last 30 years.
Interesting.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Are there any more questions? So this is a roll call. Clerk, please call the roll.
Trustee Yankovic?
Aye.
Trustee Fisher?
Aye.
Trustee Hatch?
Aye.
Trustee Markey?
Aye.
Trustee Rappin?
Aye.
And Trustee Redder.
Aye.
Thank you. Next item is item 20, an ordinance amending the Lake Bluff Municipal Code regarding no parking areas on Simpson Avenue. Is there a motion to approve this ordinance?
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. Village staff was recently contacted by residents of Simpson Avenue between East Center and East Scranton Avenues regarding parking practices and regulation on their street. The street is unusually narrow in this location, approximately 16 feet, and it is currently legal for vehicles to park on both sides of the street. Accordingly, vehicles exiting driveways on Simpson Avenue may have difficulty safely maneuvering around these other parked vehicles. The attached ordinance would simply prohibit parking in the area between the northernmost and southernmost driveways within this block of Simpson Avenue.
No parking on either side?
Just on the east side. On the east side, between the northernmost driveway, and then there is on the, and it aligns with the southernmost driveway ending on the east side.
Is it confusing, more confusing than it needs to be? Can't we just have west side only? Or no?
You can't because there's driveways on both sides of the street.
I see.
And this would prohibit parking between any of those driveways, and that's the problem. The street's so narrow, and vehicles will park behind, say,
Yeah,
the southern, or the property that's on the west side of the street, and then they have, I think, 6 feet of asphalt to maneuver out of their driveway. And
Yeah,
It's really
yeah.
tight. So the idea of that, if there's no parking between signs on the east side, there is not enough, there's no space long enough to hold a vehicle on the west side of the street, because there's driveways that
I see.
terminate on that side of the street.
Is it a problem caused by people trying to park to go to the beach, or what is it caused by?
It's
just,
People.
sometimes it's contractors, sometimes it is beach users, depending on the time of year.
my street's been really bad lately, and people aren't going to the beach. It's just been crowded. But I was wondering about if opposite sides of the street, rather, because it seems like we can't decide which side of the street we're gonna park on, so you end up going like this.
And so in this particular situation, that block has decided this is okay.
Okay,
And so for those of you who may remember, the village went through a process trying to examine how to improve parking close to the beach, largely driven to beach users. But the neighborhood, that was one of the possible recommendations, was on these north-south streets that are very narrow. Maybe these could be, or should be, no parking, and that came up, for public safety reasons, getting, equipment down them. And then the neighborhood was kind of like, well, we really like to use it. We
Yeah.
like to use it. We like
Yeah.
to send our friends there, or service providers there. So they didn't want to make it totally ban the parking. And so in this particular block, this particular setup works.
Okay.
And the neighbors on this particular stretch of the block were
clapping,
open
yes.
to, they were open
Yeah.
to, okay, it wasn't just
They
one. neighbor.
asked for it
Okay.
Cool.
after backing in a couple of cars and 2 claims.
It's a really short
It's narrow,
piece
yeah.
of street, too. Like,
Yeah.
if you can call it a piece of street, like because I walk my dog along there a lot, it's a very short
Couple hundred
area.
feet.
Yeah.
yeah.
Do we have any more questions on the board, and do we have any more comments? Online?
First reading, voice vote. Nobody's here.
Okay, awesome. It is a voice vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Any- Thank you. Any opposed? The motion carries. Thank you very much. Next item is item number 21, our trustees report. Do any trustees who wish to make a report tonight?
I want to talk about the lack of parking keys sign. Need to discuss it.
I'd like
Can
to
we-
suggest a queue.
Can we, can we follow that up by talking about a gate? at the train station?
The lack of a gate.
You don't understand.
lack
It
thereof.
is such, that report was such an enlightening
It
report to me.
was. No,
great.
I really enjoyed it. I just think it,
And I think the comments by trustee Unkenman were right on cue.
They
On P, I mean. And, no, it was
spot
great.
on as always, and it was, I thought we could just remember that fun time.
All right, moving on. Next is our item number 22. If nobody has any more comments on parking places, that is the consideration of the October 24th, 2022 executive session meeting minutes.
Those were sent out just today, so hopefully everybody had a chance to take a, okay, great.
Is there a motion to approve these minutes?
So moved.
Thank you.
Second.
Thank you. Are there any changes? Clerk, please call the roll. It's a voice vote? So it's a voice vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? This motion carries. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Do we have an executive session tonight?
No, sir.
And so therefore, at this point, I would ask for a motion for adjournment.
So moved.
Thank you.
Second?
Yeah.
Thank you very much. And we are adjourned. Thank you so much. Have a great
Do
evening.
we have to vote?
You don't have to,
Night.
Good night.
Bye,
We have to vote on that.
you don't have to vote on that, right?
What?
The
All in
adjournment.
favor?
We had a motion and a second. They have to vote on the motion.
Aye.
I heard everybody say that.
Aye.
Okay.
We're freewheeling it up
And
here.
you're